Hi, and welcome to the next lecture in this unit on ecosystems and biomes. So to start out with, an ecosystem is a community of all the living things in an area and the environment in which they live. So that includes the kinds of things we usually talk about when we talk about climate, like the amount of sun it gets, the amount of moisture it has, whether or not it's prone to, say, hurricanes or forest fires, that kind of thing. It includes the kind of microscopic life and the minerals and the soil, that kind of thing. It includes all these cute little duckies and these fishies, so the animals as well, and of course the plants. So these little, I don't know what these are, reeds, marsh reeds, something like that, and the big trees, and so on, and always the fluffy little cute bunnies. The thing about this complex web of interactions, the plants, the animals, the physical environment, is that they're all connected, and a change in one of them is going to lead to a change in all the others. It's a very interactive system. So, for example, the increase in the carbon in the atmosphere, in polar areas and the atmosphere in general, traps more heat in the atmosphere. That means that the ice around the poles is going to melt a little bit more. As it melts, it does several things. It means that these cute little polar bears, I mean, they're cute, but they would also, totally rip you up if you tried to get on their little ice floe. It means that they don't have a place to hunt from anymore, so they slowly die off. Another thing that it does is as this ice melts and creates more fresh water in the oceans, that changes the amount of salt per volume of ocean in the water, and it means that certain plants and animals and little microbes that like a certain salt content are not going to do as well. But it also means that that other plants and animals that like less salt in the oceans might thrive. As these poor little polar bears die off, the things they eat, like cute little seals, and is that what a seal looks like? That's totally what a seal looks like. Yay me, good job. Happy seal. These seals are going to multiply. There are going to be a lot more of them. So great for seals. However, what might it be bad for? Well, I don't know. What do seals eat? They probably eat fish. So, if there's a cute little fish in here that's thought it was happy itself, all of a sudden it's going to be surrounded by seals, so it's going to die off. At the same time, that means that whatever the fish eats, which is probably a bunch of floating, disgusting little plankton or something like that, that these things, because there are no fish around to eat them, are going to spread all over the place. What's that going to do? I don't know. Maybe it's going to foul the place that the seals like to lay their young or something like that, which means that now the seals are going to die off. So long story short, everything gets killed off. Well, okay, not really, but you get the idea that everything's connected to everything. Biomes are the term we used when we're talking about the major types of ecosystems. Now, different textbooks, different sources are going to talk. They're going to have different names for the ecosystems, for the main types of ecosystems, and that's okay. Everybody has their own way of talking about things. I like this map. These aren't the exact terms that we'll use, but I like this map because it's pretty simple. You've got rainforests, tropical rainforests largely around the equator, deserts in kind of somewhat more northerly latitudes, especially where it's very dry, tundras far up north near the poles, temperate forests like the kind that we live in, in mid-latitudes where there's a decent amount of rain, and so on. You get the idea. So now let's talk about these different biomes one by one. We'll get into them a little bit more. Tropical rainforests, we'll start there. These occur, as you can guess, in hot, rainy regions near the equator. It takes a lot of rain to allow these trees to grow so big. And the trees, which are called, these are usually evergreen trees in the tropical rainforests. Evergreen refers to a particular type of tree, or maybe a particular characteristic, which means that the trees don't shed their leaves in the winter. They are forever green because they keep their leaves. And in the tropical rainforest, these huge towering trees block out the sun. If you actually go to a rainforest, it's usually dark along the bottom of the forest because there are so many trees with so many leaves that no sun gets through. And that said, there are a lot of different layers of the forest. If the top layer where the very top of the highest trees are is called the canopy, where you have birds like this. Below that, you have the understory, you have the forest floor, where there are a lot of different types of animals, some of which are really cute and really okay, the others of which will like either eat you or bite you, or you try to touch them and they'll poison you. That being said, the tropical rainforests are incredibly diverse in terms of the number of different species they have. This is a problem in some ways because they're also quite vulnerable. Tropical rainforests actually have really fragile soil, which is surprising because they look so green and lush. But there's so much rain that the nutrients in the soil just drain right away if there's a disruption to the ecosystem. And so as humans kind of encroach upon the tropical rainforests, especially in places like Brazil, in the Congo, in Indonesia, that means that a lot of species, many of which we don't even know about, are being destroyed and their habitats are going away. Deciduous forest, another biome, one that we're very familiar with. We have a lot of it in South Carolina. A deciduous tree is different than an evergreen tree because it sheds its leaves about once a year. It turns red, turns orange, whatever, and drops to the ground. That's kind of the definition of a deciduous tree. There are in deciduous forests or deciduous areas, there's a decent amount of rainfall. You have warm or hot summers and relatively cool winters. And there are also a lot of different types of animals. It's a very interesting and diverse ecosystem or biome. Maybe not quite as diverse as a tropical rainforest, but still a large array of animals there. And here you have a kind of chart showing you what eats what. So if you're a rodent, actually we'll start out if you're an insect. You're an insect, you're going to get eaten by a bird. And if you're a bird, you're going to get eaten by a fox. I don't know what eats a fox. Maybe a bear eats a fox. Yeah. So if you're an insect, eventually you'll become part of a bear. That's how the food chain works. But you know that. A coniferous forest. Coniferous forests are kind of, in some ways, very different from deciduous forests because coniferous trees are. You're also familiar with them. They have cones, which makes sense when you think of the name. And they have needles for leaves. If deciduous trees have broad leaves, you think of things like oak leaves, maple leaves, dogwoods. Then coniferous trees are things like pines or spruces or fir trees, which have kind of needly leaves. These are usually evergreens, so the leaves usually stay on the tree all year long. Which isn't to say that each particular needle does, because if you've got pine trees in your yard, you know that they shed their little needles. But it usually doesn't happen that a tree will shed all of its needles at once. Coniferous forests usually happen in colder parts of the middle latitudes. So if you think of Minnesota, think of southern Alaska, think of Montana. These areas are more likely to be coniferous than deciduous. And when you have kind of a mix of these things, which, to be fair, South Carolina in a lot of places does, you've got a mixed forest. And these are areas that have the conditions of the climate and the soil that can support both deciduous trees on the one hand and coniferous trees on the other. So we're lucky in that sense because you can have a pine tree and an apple tree in your yard and all the trees get along. All right, good job. That is the end of this lecture.